Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So folks, for today's episode, this is one of those things where it kind of came out of the blue. Wasn't really expecting to make this episode, wasn't really expecting to talk about this topic. But again, you know, sometimes when you're trying to find something to talk about, when you're trying to make some sort of content, and then all of a sudden, something kind of just drops in your lap. But not only does it drop in your lap, but you're just like, wow, this is a really, really good thing to talk about. Not just in the sense that, you know, it's about the Lions and it's a good topic, but it's a good thing to talk about from the perspective of being human, of humanity. What am I talking about here? Well, as my thumbnail and as my topic is talking about, we're talking about Jared Goff. But we're not talking about Jared Goff in the typical sense here. I'm not talking about, you know, why I think he's this, why I think he's a top quarterback, blah, blah, blah. No, this is talking about him in a much more sincere manner, talking about him in a much more humane manner. Obviously, you guys all know, because it's been pushed out probably just about damn near everywhere, that the second season of Quarterback is getting set to come out on Netflix here in a couple of days. I think it's about a week. And obviously, Jared Goff is going to be in that. And, you know, it's also going to feature, you know, Kirk Cousins, and it's also going to feature Joe Burrow. And I'm looking forward to watching the whole thing and looking at it from all of the quarterbacks, but especially from Jared Goff because, well, he's my favorite quarterback, but also at the same time, he's also for the Detroit Lions. But as we've gotten closer and closer, more exclusive trailers have been kind of coming out where, you know, people can kind of get some information about what, you know, what the show is going to feature. And there was a trailer that was released yesterday where it really, I don't even know how to describe it, but it really kind of like pulled back the curtains a little bit on the very deep, very intimate relationship that Goff has with the Detroit Lions and, you know, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, the whole 9 yards. Let me just put this out there for you. Everybody knows that I have been a champion of Jared Goff ever since we've traded for him. And I have been a champion of him not only in the sense of him being a quarterback, but I've also championed him in the sense of being a good human being. And I don't typically do that when it comes to most people because it's like, listen, again, I follow pretty much what, you know, the faith is, and I've said it before, I'm a Christian. There is none righteous in the eyes of the Lord, no, not one. But with Jared Goff, I can say that, hey, you know what? Based upon what I have seen of him, this looks like a pretty good guy. But based upon what I have seen in stuff that has come out, this guy really is something else. Like, he is super special. And I mean that in the best possible way I can. And a lot of guys that work with, you know, the Detroit Lions, they are super, super special. Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, these guys are really special, good human beings. But inside of this trailer that I'm talking about here, they started talking about, you know, the whole situation surrounding when Jared Goff got traded, when Jared Goff came to Detroit, the whole narrative that had kind of fallen him, had followed him, you know, coming to Detroit, the whole 9 yards. And again, I've talked about this in the past as far as how Sean McVay and the Rams, they pretty much discarded him. They pretty much disgraced him. They made a very shameful, display of trying to get rid of him. And, you know, the whole narrative was, as I've said before in the past, was that, hey, it looked like as if the Rams were sending Jared Goff to go and die in Detroit. And Jared Goff actually talks about that during, the actual trailer a little bit. I'm actually going to read to you what Jared Goff said, and I'm also going to read to you what Dan Campbell said. If you haven't watched the trailer, I highly encourage you to do it. I'm going to be honest, it almost kind of tugs at your heartstrings, and it makes you kind of like just be like, man, you just have this sense of pride. But what did Jared Goff said? He was talking about when, he got the phone call from, Dan Campbell and from Jared and from, and Brad Holmes, and he said this. He said, it kind of brought me from this moment of, like, picking up the pieces to, like, reinvigorated with this energy of, oh, this is what it feels like to truly be wanted and to have these guys behind you. I hadn't felt that in quite some time. Again, I've said this before. A lot of what went on with the whole Jared Goff Rams fallout was in my opinion, was the fact that Sean McVay had just grown impatient. Sean McVay wanted to win. He wanted to prove that he was better than Kyle Shanahan. He wanted to have all that to his name. And Jared Goff was just not able to do what Sean McVay wanted him to do. Now, how I'm going to put this is simply this. Part of the problem was that, one, the team had not, how should I say this, advanced at the same time as what Sean McVay was wanting it to. They had to go through some rebuild. They had to go through some rebuild and reshuffling of certain things on the offense. But also at the same time, Sean McVay was not allowing Jared Goff to grow. Pretty much Sean McVay was keeping him in this bubble and pretty much saying, hey, this is what you can work within, and you need to work within it to the best of your capability. People don't always work well in that atmosphere. They have to be allowed to grow. And you can see the difference of how Jared Goff was when he was with the Rams versus how he has been here. Because here in Detroit, he has been allowed to grow. He has been allowed to expand. He has been allowed to take more ownership of things. Whereas in LA, Sean McVay made it very plainly clear. This is my offense. You're going to do exactly how I tell you to do it. And that clearly started to become a problem because it was like Goff could not further expand into whatever role, Sean McVay was giving him. He pretty much was left and, kind of stuck there. And eventually it kind of ebbed away at the relationship to where Sean McVay was just done with him, and so was Les Snead. And that's what Jared Goff, I think, is saying there, is because he's like, listen, to be truly wanted, to have those guys behind you, he's like, I hadn't felt that in a long time. And it's like, hey, you've got a team here. Yeah, they're restarting, they're rebuilding, but they want you. To have somebody or something truly want you, that is a feeling that a lot of human beings, when they actually feel it, it's an indescribable feeling. Now, Dan Campbell also recalled, the phone call that they had, and he then said this as far as how, him and Jared Goff got paired up as head coach and quarterback. He said, and this is Dan Campbell, I just wanted to make sure that he understood how excited we were, how excited I was. You're going to be part of the foundation. We're going to build this from the ground up. You're going to be a huge part of this, and you're ours. You belong with us. We're going to be tied to the hip. Again, you guys all know I have followed this, narrative, this story for a long, long time. But there were a lot of times where people wanted to say that Dan Campbell didn't like Jared Goff. There were a lot of times where people thought that Dan Campbell was just, talking coach speak when it came to Jared Goff and was just waiting for the opportunity to get rid of him because apparently, in their eyes, Jared Goff was not what he was looking for in a quarterback. That right there shows that from the very, very beginning, Jared Goff was always what Dan Campbell wanted. Jared Goff was always the kind of quarterback that Dan Campbell wanted. That's exactly what Dan Campbell said there. And Dan Campbell followed it up even further. He said, that's my guy. That's my quarterback. Every head coach has got a quarterback. If you want to have success, you better have a quarterback. And I've got one. Again, we all know how the NFL works, folks. The NFL is one of those things where it's like, hey, if you want to have a successful team, you want to have a successful program, if you want to be successful as a coach, you have to have a guy to be your signal caller. You have to have a guy that is your franchise quarterback. That is Jared Goff for Dan Campbell. And again, like I was just saying, from the very onset, from the very beginning, Dan Campbell always looked at Jared Goff as, that's my guy. that is my quarterback. And we've heard this phrase before because there was a time, I think it was an interview about a couple of years ago, and I believe it was with Tony Dungy, and Dan Campbell was saying to him, he's like, listen, that's my quarterback. Jared Goff is our guy. He is our quarterback. So this is something that has been reinforced time and time again over the last couple of years because, again, there are still people out there that want to think that, oh, well, you know what, Dan Campbell just kind of got stuck with Jared Goff. No, Dan Campbell didn't get stuck with him. That's the guy that Dan Campbell wanted. He wanted Jared Goff. Brad Holmes wanted Jared Goff. They have made that abundantly clear over the last couple of years. And again, you have to look at it for the situation for what it is that, you know, Jared Goff came into a situation that was very, very difficult to try and navigate because we have to understand something here. Number one, he was coming into a situation where he was taking over for a quarterback who had been the quarterback for the last, 12 years. Matthew Stafford was extremely popular when he left Detroit. Whoever was going to inherit filling into those shoes of the quarterback was going to be in for a rough road. And it was even made further rough with the fact that, we were starting over yet again. There was a lot of animosity because it was like, oh, we're starting over again. The Lions are never going to figure it out, blah, 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 blah. And it's like the first person always is the highest, the highest target to potentially get a whole hell of a lot of flack is the quarterback. So for Jared Goff, he kind of got the worst of both sides of the equation because it's like, okay, you're the new kid on the block. You're taking over for a guy that used to be our leader for the last 12 years. So you're already going to have this kind of, this doubt. You're already going to have this kind of, criticism because you're the new kid. But because of the fact that we're starting over again, everything that happens, good, bad, or indifferent, we're going to throw it on your shoulders. And let's understand something. In the early days of Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, there was a hell of a lot of bad. And a lot of that bad got thrown right at Jared Goff's feet. And again, some of it was his, but a lot of it wasn't. But the point is that Jared Goff looked at coming here not as, hey, I'm getting, cast away and getting thrown somewhere where nobody wants to go. Jared Goff himself said that there was a different viewpoint that he had here. And this is what he said. He said, to be able to be the first decision they made when they got here and prove them right, how great of an opportunity is that? Again, a lot of how you adapt and how you progress in life is the viewpoint, is the perspective that you have when you're going into something. Again, let's understand something here. For a lot of players back in 2020, 2021, the idea or the concept of coming to Detroit was not viewed as one of, great fanfare or one that, everybody was like, oh, wow, yeah, this is a great opportunity. Most people had looked at Detroit as like, hey, that's a place where you go to finish your career, you collect some money, and you're done. That would have been a viewpoint that Jared Goff could have had. But Jared Goff looked at it and he's like, man, this is an opportunity for me to do something really, really special. This is an opportunity for me to do something that no one's been able to do before. To actually build a winner. To actually build something where no one has really been able to build anything for the last 20, 30 years. And for me, this is where, again, kind of tying back in what Campbell and Holmes have meant to Goff and vice versa. It's like, listen, Goff himself said it. He's like, listen, for them to make me the first decision that they ever did, because you have to think about it. That was the first major decision that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell made was, hey, we want Jared Goff. Yeah, obviously we're trading away Matthew Stafford, but we're not trading him away just for draft picks. We want Jared Goff. Jared Goff is who we're going after. That was their first major decision. And to be the first major decision that they made, that speaks volumes. And that's why Jared Goff then followed it up with the fact with all the trust and all the confidence they had put into him and said, listen, you're our guy. You are the one that we want. Goff then said, and you could, again, if you watch it, you can tell he's very emotional. Like he's on the verge of tears. And he literally says that. He said, sorry, I'm trying not to cry, but it's been so incredible to build with them. That moment of hearing them on the phone, knowing the opportunity that I had here was special. Again, when you listen to all these quotes that I've just given you, you hear something that's very, very special. You hear something that talks to the human spirit in a way that you don't really get to hear a whole lot in this modern day and age, because everything gets kind of, drowned out with all of the news that we have to deal with, or you know what? No one has time for the sentimentality crap. But it's like, when you hear this stuff, you instantaneously, you hear the character of Detroit. You really do. Because what these quotes are showing is that you have an organization that, yes, it wants to win. It believes in winning. It believes in manifesting and developing a culture of success. But they're not going to do so by trampling on people's, feelings. They're not going to do it where success overcomes everything else. And you also hear from these quotes that, there is that deep, intimate connection between men as far as, hey, you know what? We're in this together. It's not like, hey, you know what? As soon as things go bad, we're going to turn on each other and you know what? Sayonara, we're going to find somebody else. It's not, it's not like a cutthroat business with them. Yeah, obviously football is cutthroat in a sense where it's like, hey, you know what? Eventually, if you don't do your job, you're going to lose your job. But the Lions have shown that with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, and also now with this whole behind the scenes with Jared Goff, it's like, listen, we're not going to try to intentionally, sabotage you. We're not going to try and make you a scapegoat. We are going to do whatever we can to really make this work. And you can clearly see that by doing that, the best of all outcomes really has come out for the Detroit Lions. Think about it. For a team that has not been able to find success in any sort of manner for the last 20, 30 years up until now, and they were able to do it with a first-time head coach that everybody wanted to call a meathead, with a quarterback that everybody thought was a bridge quarterback, washed up, couldn't do anything, and with a first-time GM who had never drafted before but had plenty of draft experience as far as a scout was concerned, the fact that the Lions, the one team in the NFL that nobody thought could do anything, to have all of those firsts or have all of those situations that, would have made things very difficult for most teams, the Detroit Lions were the ones that could make that work. That speaks, again, volumes to the character of, not only the people that we have in the organization, Sheila, Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, Chris Spielman, Mike Disner, Rod Wood. It speaks to them, but it also speaks to the character of the city. It's like, listen, we've got your back. If you come in and you are a hard worker, and you know what? We're going to be there for you. That's what Detroit is all about. It's not just about hard work, but it's like, listen, we know what it's like to be down on the mat. We know what it's like to have to, get back up after getting knocked down and have to dust ourselves off and, keep going at it. That's exactly what Jared Goff was when he came here. It's like, listen, he just gotten, pretty much hit in the chops pretty damn hard and had been continually getting hit in the chops because of the national media, the Rams, the whole 9 yards. And yet he came here to Detroit, even though there were not a lot of people that were excited about him, but he exemplified, he personified exactly what those traits were without having really had a chance to show it on the football field. But yet, over the next couple of years, he showed it every single time he went out there and he played for us. So it's like, yeah, you see how Jared Goff was a perfect fit for not only the Lions, but he was also a perfect fit for the city of Detroit, which is kind of funny considering the fact that he is a California guy. It's like you couldn't have had two different kind of backgrounds if you wanted to, but he comes here to Detroit and he just fits perfectly for what this city and what the team is about. That's why Dan Campbell has said, listen, you're good enough for Detroit because he is Detroit. You take a look at everything that Goff has been through over the last couple of years, he is Detroit. There are very few people, very few players you can actually look back on and say, yeah, if you want to talk about a person that fits Detroit down to the bone, that's that guy. There are a couple, but Jared Goff is definitely one of them. From where he came from to where he is now, he is definitely Detroit. That's what I have to say with this. And I'm telling you this right now, I can't wait to watch the rest of it when it comes out because I'm sure it's going to be an absolute, fun, wonderful episode, or, episodes to watch, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other guys, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, and Goff have to say as far as, when more episodes come out. But this right here is just absolutely just a spectacular insight to what we get to hear once again as far as the background and the backstory, as far as how Goff got here, and how the Lions with Goff and Campbell and Holmes have built everything the way they have. But anyway, folks, I just wanted to talk about this. Hopefully it inspires you. It definitely inspired me. Hopefully it makes you guys, feel something good today, because it definitely made that for me. So having said that, I'm going to say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I hope you all enjoyed the content. Hope you all, want to keep coming back. If you do, please, by all means, I encourage you all to hit that subscribe button, but I also want to encourage you all, please, make sure you hit that bell notification icon as well. Hope everyone has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. And with that, I just want to say God bless. Until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.